let me introduce the SAP Data Archiving with Nuxeo via our certified SAP integration aqilink. So what you want to do is typically to reduce the SAP database size and complexity by storing SAP database information to an external file, move it to the archive Nuxeo, and still have it accessible within SAP via the archive information system or in your transaction or even within reporting. And this is exactly what we support with our certified integration. So let me give you a short introduction on what we do from the customizing side and how actually such an archive run is looking like. And finally, we display the information within SAP. First of all, let's have a look to the archive we're using for data archiving. So we go to transaction OAC 0 and we check the archive we are using. We will use here the data archive to Nuxeo. So important that we have the document error, data archiving, and of course the settings for our repository that is located on the Nuxeo site. As we have seen now the repository that we will use, let's continue with the customizing and go to the customizing transaction SARA. So in SARA we choose an archiving object. So we take a document, which is a very well equipped document archiving object, on the SAP side. First of all, have a look to the customizing. For us, the important settings are here in this technical settings. And we see here all the archive object related information. So the file path we are using, as well that we only store two objects per one file. This is of course only in a test system we want to use here. We want to start the deletion job automatically. Post-progressing, also processing. There, for example, the secondary indices are deleted or updated, and also partially infrastructures filled by SAP. And here you see that we are using our N4 repository, which is interesting, where SAP stores the archive files too. And we see that we do not start this automatically because simply we want to do this step manually later. And we store the archive file before we delete, which means the delete program reads out of storage. This is the hardest setting for the archive because there is a lot of communication during the deletion run, because when you delete, SAP checks again the information in the archive data file against the table space, and only if this is correct it will delete out of table space. So this is our setting that we are using here to get the highest security in the data archiving process. As we have seen part of the customizing run, let's now leave customizing and go to the actual archiving. Here we can create an archive variant so that we tell the system which document should be stored. And to find out a corresponding document, let's have a look to the corresponding table. The table is BKPF, and we want to check for financial documents, and I want to see this for the year 2016. So let's take simply the first one. Copy here this financial document, and we will take this setting. So it was company code 1010, and I only take here the financial document out of the period 2016. So first of all, we go in the test mode, and we want to have a complete log. And I write here my initials and say 2. Then we have, for this variant, we have to select the attributes. And I think we are done so far here with the settings for this variant. System is asking us, even if there are open periods, if you want to continue. Let's see if we are able to store and archive this or this financial document. So now let's execute this write run with the start parameter, we take immediate, save this setting, and we can now execute this run. Let's have a look to the job overview. You see that there's a submit job, and we are now waiting for the write job. So the system has finished the write job, and when we have a look to the job log, we see that there was one document read and could be archived because we are in test mode. So nothing has happened up to now, but it looks like, yes, promising, this most probably will be okay. So I delete these two job logs to stay clean here on this side and go back to our variant, because you remember we have been in test mode. Let's now run the whole thing in production. We save. I'm asked quite often for this one, open periods. Yes, I want to continue. Finally, so start date is still okay. Now let's run the whole thing in production mode. When we have a look again here to our job overview, we now see in the job log that actually a little bit more has happened. So an archive file has been created in our Exchange path that has been done in the customizing. We see here the file name and that we have one document read and one archived. So up to now in the system, the information is read and stored to an external file in the Exchange directory, and we can have a nice overview when we have a look here to the management of the archive data files. So we see that we have here one incomplete session of today, and here is the session that we created right now. And when we have a look here to this document, we see that the document is actually accessible in this physical path. So SAP can read the whole thing, but it is not stored up to now. It's important to understand this. So it's currently in the Exchange directory, and we have completed the archiving, but not the deletion up to now out of the SAP database, which, by the way, can be reflected when we have here a look in the data browser and we search again in the data browser for this one. We still see our entry here for the document that we were looking for. So here's all the type of information available in the header table of this financial document. Now let's go to the next step. So we want to store now the file, and let's do the next step here. You know, in the customizing, we said the deletion should be done out of the archive. That's why we now move the file from the Exchange directory to the archive system. So when this is done here, we want to start here. We select the archive that we want to store actually to the Nuxeo storage, and you see this is what we're looking for. This is the archive file where write is completed. So we want to take this file and move this to the archive. Again, we say it's immediate, always to save there, and that's most probably it. So we can start now this storage job. Now when we have a look here to our overview, you see that some more things are done equally. First of all, the storage job to Nuxeo has been already finished, so it was quite fast. In a second step, you remember, the system now deletes the information out of the SAP database based on the storage of this file in the storage, so in Nuxeo. When we continue, see now that we have also deletion finished, and we have finally ended the whole archive run, which means everything seems to be okay. Of Of course, it was only one document in the archive file, but we did now hear from the archive or data archive management everything completely. That's why we have a look to the management, and now we see that we have some complete archive sessions. For us is the interesting one, the Nuxeo 2, which I did here today. And when we have a look now to our archive file, we finally see that the archive file is really stored. The deletion is completed, so we can later check the entry in the table space, and the file is not accessible here on the physical file path because the file is accessible via archive link. So really we stored this information to Nuxeo. The final thing, just to have this short update, when I go here to my table view and we execute this one again, you see that our entry up here is now missing because it has really been deleted out of SAP. So the data archive run is completed. Now the big question is, how can we access this information? And I think this is also important to understand. There are many ways to access archive data. So on the archive information system, we also can simply search now for our document. So we take our archive infrastructure for the financial documents that has been filled. So when we evaluate this one, we can search, for example, there are not too many in there because I did some archive runs before. We see now here are the two informations, and when we actually go to this document, we will see that we have the two options. We can have a technical view or the single document display. The single document display looks like as it would be here in the SAP system. Not all SAP archiving objects are supported that well, but you see this is the typical view for an end user. And really, this looks like the whole thing is still in the SAP system. But here you get the information, it's already archived. So this information actually comes out of Nuxeo, but it's completely available for the end user as it has been before. And the second option is simply also to have a look here on this information on the technical view. And we can check this here, seeing this a little bit different. Now we see here the really technical information in our header data. This is more or less the information that we find here in these table entries, but you can always scroll a little bit deeper and get all kind of information, of course, also in this very technical view. And both are supported for this financial document out of Nuxeo, and you get the complete information back to you. Now let's have a short look on the Nuxeo side. So we will find there the file that we stored from SAP to Nuxeo. It's not a big thing because at the end we are just looking for a file that is stored in Nuxeo and can be accessed by SAP. So we have a look here to our workspace for SAP, and when we check here, we have a look to our documents. And voila, here is the content that we stored right before. Of course, we can not display this data file that was actually coming from SAP on the Nuxeo side. It's a binary flat file that can be read by SAP, or let me say, by the integration to SAP, as you have seen before, directly in the SAP transaction or via the SAP archive information system. So we can just see some SAP information where it is coming from. So this is our source SAP system. It was the repository that we're using, and that's the unique identifier to connect it back to the SAP system.